ESF Connected. Today we're talking all about recycling. ESF Connected starts now. Welcome. My name is Kate Walker, and today I'm here to talk about recycling. I am the new project director for the Center for Sustainable Materials Management here at ESF. And today's show is going to be the second in a series around sustainability. Today we're really happy to be joined by some experts around the state that are involved in this center, and I'd like to introduce them. First, we have joining us Matt Marco from the Department of Environmental Conservation, and we also have Jesse Cairns today with us, ESF graduate of 2017 and from Syracuse University. We're going to talk today about residential recycling, contamination, and issues around the confusion, what to recycle, what not to recycle, and the value of everyday materials, why it's really important to recycle, and then the center is about to launch a new Recycling Right website. So you're going to hear a little bit about that too. We're so excited. First, I'd like to introduce our first guest, Matt Marco, joining us. Many folks already know Matt. He's been around campus for a long time. Matt is coming to us today as the Region 7 Director of the Department of Environmental Conservation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today. But you also may know him as in 2016, you were nominated by or appointed by the New York State Governor to serve as a trustee at ESF and have joined us in that capacity since 2016 and have been the board chair for 4 years, Matt? Is it 4 years now?
That's right.
All right. So thank you again, and I'll kick it off to you, Matt.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and get to talk about this exciting topic of recycling and sustainable materials management today. I have actually been here on the campus quite a bit over the last decade. I've been on the board since 2008, and chair for the last 4 years. And it's great to see ESF playing an important role in this important conversation. So I guess we'll get started with the presentation. When you're ready, we pull up the first slide and talk about Recycle Right New York. So what is Recycle Right New York? It is a statewide public education and outreach campaign that is focused on increasing recycling participation, as well as reducing the residential recycling confusion and contamination. So it's really focused on those two main points as part of the education and outreach campaign under the title Recycle Right New York. To give a brief and recent history of how we got there, DEC facilitated statewide recycling stakeholder meetings in 2018. A lot of this was in reaction to market changes and shifts. People are probably familiar with what's known as National Sword, which was China reducing the incoming materials from other countries, mostly due to contamination and other challenges in the recycling materials we were sending. And as a result of that market shift and the challenges that were created, we knew here in New York State we needed to do something different. And we facilitated statewide recycling stakeholder meetings in 2018 that were hosted in a number of locations. We had a recycling education committee. At the time, it started with around 70 professionals. Jesse's informed me that's well over 100 at this point, which is great. And the campaign officially for Recycle Right officially launched in 2019, which included a number of project areas that we'll get into and discuss in greater detail later. The New York State Center for Sustainable Materials Management here at ESF, which was introduced a little bit in last week's episode with our great expert and colleague, Mark Lichtenstein, is a $5.75 million grant to ESF from the DEC. It's intended to be a 5-year period for the current scope of work, but depending on our success and progress, it could be extended as much as another 5 years. It was formally announced last fall, and it is the first of its kind in the United States. So we're really excited to not just have this in New York State, but be focused here, of course, at ESF, and in collaboration with the other institutions that are part of this statewide effort. We'll also move on to talking about why education and outreach is so important. And for a deeper discussion on that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and our panelist here, Jesse Kearns, who is the program coordinator at Syracuse University's Center for Sustainable Community Solutions. Jesse?
Thanks, Matt. So as Matt mentioned, Recycle Right New York is first and foremost a residential outreach and education campaign. And so I want to talk a little bit about why is this important? And number one, it's to increase the number of people that are actively recycling. And it's also to increase the amount of recyclable material that we're able to recover instead of those going to landfill or incineration. We want to get these materials back and we want to keep them in productive use for as long as we can. So I brought this slide here. It's got a graph. This is from the EPA. It was their Sustainable Materials Management report that came out in 2020. And it gives us a look at how we've been doing with recycling since 1960 all the way up to 2018. And what you'll see if you look at around the year 2000 is we start to plateau off. So we actually around 2010, we get up to about 34% of our what's called MSW, municipal solid waste. We're recycling about 34% of that on a national level. And it kind of plateaus out. We were stuck at 34 for the next decade or so until today. And then you see a little dip there towards the end too, where we slide down to about 32%. I want to get into a little bit more nuance about these stats as well, because it says 32% of MSW recycled, but that's not all of the material that goes to the curbside. That's not your papers, metals, glass, and plastics. That actually includes composting as well. If you look at the title of this figure, MSW recycling and composting rate. So if you take into account composting, you want to take out about 8 or 9% for that. So what you're really looking at is probably a national average about 25% for recyclables, and we've been stuck there for the past decade. So something has to change, something has to shift, and education and outreach is a big thing that we can do to try to get more participation and more recyclable items going into the bin. This is another graph from that same report by the Environmental Protection Agency from 2020, and this is looking at 2018's data. And it's a characterization of everything that's in municipal solid waste, MSW. So you'll see all the different material categories here listed out. So let's look at paper and cardboard, for example. 23% of our MSW is paper and cardboard. If we were able to capture 100% of that material, we'd be at the recycling rate that we've been stuck at for 10 years. So there's a whole lot of room for us to grow here. Same thing if you look at food and yard trimmings, that's 21% and 12% respectively. If we captured all of that, that'd be about a third of what we're sending to landfill or incineration. We could be composting that, turning that into a valuable soil amendment that we could be putting back into our soils to regenerate them and to build soil health. So I just brought these two graphs to show that we have a lot of potential. And it's the task of Recycle Right New York to try to achieve some of that.
Yeah, so just to give you a little break from talking there, Jesse, so when Mark and I mentioned that 30 to 35% rate last week, we were talking about statewide averages, right? Numbers that we think we know. Those ones do not include the composting, I'm fairly certain, but we recognize that those could be much higher, even though they're a little bit higher than national rates, we think.
Yeah.
Right? This New York State would be a little bit higher than other.
It can be tricky to tell because it could depend on where you're living in New York State too, and the capabilities of your system, of your solid waste management system for your area.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's a good thing to note too. Is this national average does not speak to the state level, and the state level might not speak to the level of the community that you're living in
Right.
too.
And one of the things we did reference last week, but as part of this effort with outreach and education, is understanding what those initial numbers are. So across the state, trying to get a better handle on what these numbers are, not only for the state, but for each community, because each community, like you said, is going to be a little bit different. So
Yeah.
Thanks.
A little side story too. I want to talk about these waste characterizations because I always I think it's interesting when I'm talking with the public or if I'm talking with students about how we know these numbers. And so a waste characterization is literally cracking open bags of trash or recyclables
Yeah.
and then separating them into these different materials classes
Yeah.
to see what's actually in there.
I don't think you're allowed at this table if you haven't done that yet. So, Matt,
Yeah.
have you? I'm sure you've done that, right? Can you check that box?
Not only done it, of course, as an agency, our office has
Yeah.
done it and taken it on as a volunteer effort within our
Yeah.
group in Syracuse.
I will say I've only done it with food waste, so I haven't gone across the board. No hazardous waste, no medical waste yet. So there's room to grow.
Absolutely. We have so much room to grow, which gets us back to why education and outreach. We talked about we would love to increase participation. We want to increase the amount of materials that we're capturing. But we're also wanting to provide some state-level education and outreach because recycling guidelines across the state are so variable. Depending on where you live is going to dictate what you're able to put into that recycling bin or bring to the transfer station for a variety of reasons that we'll get into a little bit later. So we want to try to help people in the easiest way possible know what is acceptable to go into recycling bins and what really should be managed in another way. And so this whole idea of people not knowing exactly what should be going in a bin or not leads to this practice that has been given a term in the sustainable materials management industry known as wish cycling. And so a definition for wish cycling is when you have an item that you're just not sure about if it should go in the recycling bin, but you think, oh, geez, I really don't want this to go to waste. I'm going to put it into the recycling bin and hope somebody somewhere will take that and find something to do with it. And oftentimes it's so well-intentioned, people really don't want to waste things. It's an indication, it's a nonverbal indication from them that they want to be recycling more. But unfortunately, their local recycling system might not be able to handle that material well. And so actually wish cycling can be rather detrimental to local recycling systems for a variety of reasons that I'm going to get to here next after the slide. But before I do, I wanted to come back to this idea of recycling programs being variable throughout the state. And so I brought a slide here. This is a recycling menu from down on Long Island. And so I want to talk about some of the big differences between different recycling programs. Some are known as single stream, where you can put all of your recyclable materials into one bin. Others, there's still some programs throughout the state that are dual stream, and here's an example of one here. So on certain days, you're putting out only cardboard and paper, and then on other days, you're putting out your containers, your plastics, and your metals. But this program is even more different because glass containers have been problematic for some communities recently. So in this particular program, this recycling program, they don't want glass with the plastics and the metals. They actually have a drop-off program for that, so they can have the glass completely separated from everything else, and that gives it more likelihood that it's going to be turned into a new product. You'll also see on here, this program takes plastics 1s and 2s, but they won't take 3s through 7s. There's other places in the state that say, yeah, we'll take all of those plastic materials that have resin identification codes 1s through 7s. And then you'll even see another difference here too. They're not accepting cartons at the current moment. So this is just an example that I want to use that from county to county, even town to town, sometimes what you can and cannot put into your recycling bin may be different. So how you practice recycling at home may be different than when you drive halfway across the state and you're going somewhere for an event. The guidelines may be completely different, and that could be awfully confusing for folks. So we're going to try to get at some of that through Recycle Right New York.
Jesse, that kind of speaks to what was talked about last week when you had Mark on as a guest, is talking about the convenience factor of recycling in general, and Recycle Right really needs to get into the dialogue with the communities and find the right balance between that convenience factor, as well as you even indicated, wish cycling is a expression of wanting to recycle, and we need to do it right. But we also need to make it convenient so people can do it effectively, and yet at the same time maintain the value of those waste streams and recycling streams. So it's really important that we strike that balance and open the dialogue for this outreach and education campaign.
Mm-hmm. There's a national nonprofit organization, Recycle Across America, and I think they actually helped to coin some of this Recycle Right messaging, and they have this great analogy that they use for the variability of recycling programs, but also how we talk about them, and they liken it to the rules of the road. Imagine if you drove out of New York State and the rules of the road were completely different, and all the signage was the same. A stop sign is green and is a triangle instead of the the stop sign that we all know today. So they use that to say this is why part of the reason why recycling can be so confusing is the signs you go in different places look different, the bins look different, what's accepted in the bins is different. So it's no wonder that there's a lot of confusion with recycling. The Recycle Right campaign, as Matt said, kicked off in January 2019, and essentially what it was there were monthly materials that were being created, and they were going out through that group of 100 recycling professionals and stakeholders throughout the state in an attempt to try to standardize some of the language and things that we want to communicate to residents. And so that group of 100 professionals, we came together with some surveys and through some dialogue with them to figure out what are all of the items that we can agree upon that should not be in the recycling bin. What are those items that are coming in the recycling bin that are causing some major issues for the recycling system? And we refer to these as contaminants, as the top contaminants. And so that's where Recycle Right New York first focused its effort during 2019 with these monthly materials that were going out through listservs, e-newsletters, social media posts on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and just to try to get this in front of as many people as possible. So I want to talk about some of those top contaminants, those things that are being wish cycled. And they're problematic for the recycling system because they can endanger the people that are working at recycling facilities, and they can also be rather destructive to the machinery and the equipment that they have at the facilities too. And let me define that acronym there, MRF, NRF. That stands for Materials Recovery Facility, and that's where a lot of single stream, but some dual stream materials go. They're all commingled together, and then they enter a series of mechanical devices that separate the materials back out again. So paper goes one way, cardboard goes another way, plastic goes to its end residual pile where it's baled up and then sold on the market to hopefully be made into something new. So this idea of contaminants injuring employees and impacting equipment. Got a couple of photos here that I took 2 or 3 years ago now. This is the Waste Management MRF here in Liverpool, New York. And I just wanted to bring that slide to show how those commingled materials look as they're moving across the conveyor belts. You can't tell in this photo, maybe you can by how the materials are blurred a little bit, but that conveyor belt's actually going pretty fast. And those two employees there are trying to spot any materials that shouldn't be in that stream and pull them out so they don't accidentally end up with that end bale. And there are some items that come through here that can harm those workers. A big one is medical sharps, actually. So it's very common throughout New York State and throughout the country. Folks will good-naturedly want to keep their sharps in a rigid plastic bottle, but then accidentally that bottle gets into the recycling bin and can really impact the health of workers at a recycling facility. So we want to be careful to avoid wish cycling for those purposes. There's also a lot of weird things that come through MRFs. I've seen on tours old like handguns, and there can be some really dangerous kind of like explosive things. People thinking, oh, it's metal, so I can put it in there and it'll get separated with the metal and get recycled. So workers we want to be very cognizant of and protect them because they're doing an essential job for us. They are the ones, I think we maybe forget, we think that these materials are going to a fully automated facility, but there's a lot of people that are working very hard to take our natural resources that we work so hard to extract in the first place to get them separated correctly and get them made into new materials.
It's a great time to bring up again, as Mark said last time, that there isn't the word waste, right? There's no such thing as waste. These are resources, and they can be reused into something else. And particularly when we think about circular economies, and what the center is really trying to do is go to that hierarchy and make sure that we're reusing as much as we can. So thanks for letting us have that little moment there, because it is, you back to the same point is to wish cycling. People are trying the best to not have it go to the landfill, but it's creating more of a problem. One, for the safety of workers, but also it ends up costing communities more money because, so you're transporting this from the house. The municipal entity or the private entity is paying. Someone's paying the worker to do this and clearing it out, so it's costly. And then obviously the environmental impact of that transportation and then where it ends up. So all around, this is going to be beneficial to everybody.
Absolutely, yeah. So my next slide here, this is the same, it's a photo from the waste management facility in Liverpool, and this is one of the first mechanical devices that the commingled materials hit. And I wish I had a little video clip to show you because it's really impressive to see these at work. So what you're looking at is an inclined plane, and on that plane is a series of axles, and on each axle is it's like a spinning rubber star. They call this a star screen or a 2D, 3D separator. And what's supposed to happen on this piece of equipment is that 3D bottles and containers are going to fall between those spinning rubber stars, and then paper and cardboard are going to surf across the top up to a higher conveyor. You can actually see some cardboard there jumping over to its next area that it's going to go to. But one of the top items that's identified by recycling programs across the state and across the country are film plastics. Those are, formerly plastic grocery bags, but they can be other types of film plastics too, like bread bags or produce bags, the bag that a newspaper comes in, dry cleaning bags. All of those really flimsy type plastics are considered film plastics. So a lot of people wish cycle them because they think, hey, it's plastic, so plastic is recyclable. I'll put it into the bin and it'll get sorted out. Fortunately, those film plastics get wrapped around the star screen, plugs up the negative space that the containers are supposed to fall through, and then a lot of bottles end up going to the top conveyor with the paper and cardboard, and it's too much of a contamination for that. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So facilities like this have to shut down multiple times a day, and then one of their employees has to climb in there with a box cutter and remove all of that film plastics, and they do it multiple times a day too, which means that they're not moving material, so they're losing some throughput, they're losing valuable time to separate materials and to get those back onto the market. So yeah, film plastics, please do not put them in your recycling bin. They're a major headache for facilities across the state.
And of course, Jesse, film plastics are a challenge. We have the bag ban that has been widely advertised, and I think the communities are mostly successful in managing that transition. But it can be, we talked about again, going back to the education, it can be confusing because a lot of these film plastics may say on them, recycle me, and have a recycling logo on them. And it can be confusing to people to not understand that, at least in their community, it should not be put into that recycling stream, that curbside container. It's not to say that science can't recycle that material. As Kate said, really nature doesn't understand waste. It will break down, and there are probably sources that'll take that on. But as we know with a lot of the film plastics, it's a separate source. So a lot of your grocery stores will accept them at the door, and we need to do a better job of communicating that and educating the public through this outreach campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that term recyclable, I think, is something that we're trying to address early on in this campaign too, because there is this difference between something being theoretically recyclable and then feasibly recyclable.
Right.
So we're moving away from that a little bit, and with a lot of our language, we're trying to say, is it acceptable or not for your program where it's at currently? And I'll probably mention this later on, but just to reiterate this point, if your recycling system can effectively and efficiently separate an item, and if there's a market to sell that item on, then it's most likely going to be accepted for recycling. If one of those things is not true, if it's very difficult to separate, or if there's not a current market for it, then chances are it might not be accepted in your local program.
Exactly. And that's a leap forward for the public to understand and then to put into practice, and we need to work on that.
Absolutely. We're planning to. So, so this focusing on top contaminants, we talked about worker safety. We talked about the impacts to machinery at the materials recovery facility. There's a couple more issues with this too. So say some of these wish cycled items make it through the facility and they get baled up. So that example that I used before, if some plastic made it over the 2D, 3D separator and gets baled up with the cardboard, that's not good for the secondary processor or the recycler who's going to receive that bale next to turn those paper products into something new. All of a sudden, they've got these materials in there that they don't want. This is a photo from Ulster County Resource Recovery Agency. This is their tip floor. This is what it looks like. And for anyone who hasn't been to a materials recovery facility, the volume of materials is impressive. It leaves a mark on you when you see every day the amount of materials that are flowing through these systems. It's very impressive, and really impresses upon you that, man, we should be doing this good, or else we should be doing this well, or else there could be some really negative things that happen because of it.
You know, you're in COVID for a long time, in the COVID world, where you're like, oh man, I can't wait for things to get back to normal so I can go look through a MRF again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
No humor.
absolutely. It's been a while since I've seen a lot of these colleagues, where I'm usually there doing tours and bringing students or members of the public so they can see for themselves how these operate. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that. I bring this photo on my presentation to show you that there are some items in here that I know Ulster County doesn't want. There are black plastic items in there that they very specifically tell their clients, we don't want that, even though it's plastic and even though it has the recycling symbol on it. Please don't include these with your other plastic materials, because there are additives to plastic items that can make them incompatible with other plastic items of the same type. So it's very important to know your local guidelines, and that's another big point of Recycle Right New York too. We're going to be directing people as often as possible to knowing their local guidelines, so that they're putting the materials in their bin that their local system is able to handle. I talked about bales. It's just like you think. It's like a hay bale, except for your recyclable materials. This is what they look like at the end. They're compacted together in these cubes, and then they're wound up with wire. They're loaded onto either a train or a tractor trailer, and then they're driven to the next facility where they're either processed even further, or they're turned into new items. So when there's contamination in these bales, so here I think we've got either steel cans or aluminum cans. I can't tell from how far away I am in the photo. But if you have paper or if you have plastic in there, that's going to decrease the value of these bales. And those buyers on the market who are going to turn those into new materials, they're watching out for that. And if contamination rates are too high, they're going to reject that truck, which means that either the company or the municipality that separated those materials now has to manage those via landfill or incineration. So really, it's just taken a very long and a very expensive trip from your home to the landfill or incineration facility. So contamination is a big area that we're trying to address here at the beginning of the Recycle Right campaign. So I'm going to transition a little bit to talk about some of the outputs. Matt and I mentioned already a couple of times that we have roughly 100 recycling stakeholders and professionals from across the state, and that's very important to us because we need to understand their local needs, their perspectives. We have to have an understanding of what their local systems are like, so that we can be creating communications that are at most in harmony with our group of stakeholders as we possibly can. So we're in constant communication with them as we're developing these materials, and we take their feedback very seriously, and are always looking for more feedback too. So that's a big part of what we do with Recycle Right New York, is just making sure that we understand what's happening from the stakeholder perspective. And then once we get that feedback, that crucial input, that's how we're making our materials. And as I've been saying all along here, we're focusing on problematic items and potentially behaviors too, and trying to correct those through public outreach and education. And some of the channels that we've been using in the beginning here, like I said, e-newsletters, social media posts, and we're hoping to get into creating some different types of communication materials moving forward here in 2021 and beyond, and trying to use some different outlets as well. We'll talk about that just a little bit later. So I've been talking about this Recycle Right New York public outreach campaign for a while, and I wanted to show you a couple of examples too, in case you haven't seen them on social media or some other outlet yet. So here we have, this is one of the materials that was created earlier on in the program, focusing on our old friend film plastics. Please don't put them in the curbside bin. We have return to retail opportunities for this. So save your bread bags, save your produce bags, save bubble wrap if you're getting that from your online e-orders that you're getting material shipped to your house from. And a lot of retail centers will take those back, not just grocery stores, but other shopping facilities as well. In the atrium area, that entryway, there should be a designated container where you can put those in. Make sure they're clean, make sure they're dry, they don't have food residue or anything in there, and then those will go on, and they won't cause issues at the MRF, and hopefully they'll get made into a new product too. This is just an example of visually how these materials look. Here's another one. We're not just focusing on what items can and cannot go into the bin, but we're also focusing on behaviors too. So not only is it important to know your local recycling guidelines so that you understand which items can go in, but some of them require just a little bit of prep too. So cardboard, you don't want to leave those fully constructed. You want to break them down, and you want them to be flat. And if you didn't know why, just from a few slides ago, now you do, because as you saw inside the MRF, it needs to be flat so that it can surf over top of that 2D, 3D separator, that star screen, so it can be separated from all the other containers. That's one of the main reasons. It also helps with trucking too. When you remove all the airspace out, you've got a little bit more, and you can have longer hauling routes, so you can fit more into your truck. And then lastly, I've got this third example from the Recycle Right New York online social media campaign, to say that we're not only focusing on recycling, but we really want to get at, as you and Mark were talking about on the previous episode, this higher up on the waste management hierarchy, the sustainable materials management hierarchy. Recycling's great, but we can achieve and we can realize some really more impactful benefits when we're reducing waste before it occurs and when we're able to reuse some materials too. So here's one saying, plastic straws, yeah, they're plastic. What type of plastic? And the shape is probably not going to do well at a MRF, so you probably don't want to include those in your recycling bin. They'll probably just fall through and end up in the residual pile that'll be managed through landfill or incineration. So instead, maybe in the future you can opt for a paper straw that might be compostable, or a metal or glass reusable straw that you can just reuse over and over again. Prevent waste before it occurs. So Recycle Right 2.0, we're moving on in kind of a new era of the Recycle Right campaign. We're all very excited about it. We've been working away for months and months to prepare a lot of new things for this campaign. One of the big ones is branding. So we had an initial branding for Recycle Right New York, but then with that large stakeholder group of 100+ professionals, we went through and we engaged them with a lot of surveys and communication saying, what sort of tone do you want the Recycle Right campaign to have? What do you think will resonate with your residents best? Should it be optimistic? Should it be fun? Should it be playful? What sort of words would you use to characterize the campaign? And from all that feedback, we created branding. We found a font. We did a color palette. And we created a brand new logo that we're very excited to unveil coming Earth Day 2021, April 22nd. We'll also be launching our Recycle Right New York website. It'll be a standalone website for since the beginning of the campaign. Recycle Right New York materials have been living on the DEC's website, and now we're going to have our own. It'll be recyclerightny.org, and that's going to go live Earth Day 2021. It'll have all the new branding, and it's going to have all kinds of information and resources available on there too, which maybe we can talk about if there's some questions coming through in a little bit. So, okay. And I mentioned too, just a couple of slides ago, that in addition to this new website, we're really looking to create some more materials, outreach materials. In addition to e-newsletter and social media posts, we want to be creating some short video content. We hopefully will do some PSAs that could either go on radio or YouTube, television, or maybe even local news channels as well. And we'd like to develop some additional tools for our website. Been talking an awful lot about confusion and contamination, and the two initial resources that we'll have on the site will hopefully get at some of that. So one of them we're calling our Know Your Local Guidelines tool, and it's essentially a list right now that you can that users can go to, and they can find their menu, their recycling menu, hopefully with as little as one click. They can get to that PDF or that web page for their municipality and then see all the things that should or should not be going into their bin. That tool is, I think, going to be super useful. It is a little bit, it has room to grow as well, because not everybody's recycling systems is purely managed by municipalities. There are public-private partnerships involved here as well. So some people might have to go to their private haulers to get that list. And then a second tool that we're very excited about, we're calling our Recyclopedia. There's other Recycle Right New York campaigns and efforts in other states that are developing similar tools. And it's to go beyond. If you think back to that slide that I showed from Long Island, where it said we accept plastics 1s and 2s, there are so many plastic materials. And from that little guidance alone, somebody might not know what to do with a lot of random plastics that they have that are commonly found in the home. So the Recyclopedia tool is going to be a list of roughly 320 items, things that you commonly find at home, and it'll give you some very detailed instructions about how to properly manage that material. So should it go in the recycling bin? Is it accepted by some recycling programs but not by others? Is this a household hazardous waste item that should be saved and properly managed at events that happen throughout the year? We're going to have all that information on there, and we're going to be building in a lot of reduction and reuse type communication into that tool as well. And then lastly, we would love to be facilitating some in-person engagement opportunities as well. A personal dream of mine is to someday get at the New York State Fair, to have some kiosks where we have compost, trash, recycling bins all together with the proper signage, and having a little docent or somebody at those bins to talk through people's questions and to just be there to answer any types of material management questions that they might have. I think those in-person opportunities, while you're reaching maybe a smaller number of people with each instance, you're really getting at some qualitative kind of conversation with folks as well.
Great, thank you, Jesse. And I think all of us at this point would love any in-person events that we can do safely. So certainly I love the idea of being at the State Fair and really meeting people where they're at with this. You know, you don't necessarily think about these questions, as we've said all along. These aren't things that the general public are not like us. We're not thinking about our waste every day. And so they may have a couple of questions that they don't have the time to go in yet to look at a website or to find it. But if you can meet people where they're at, sometimes just reaching that broader audience is huge. So meeting people in person will be great once we can do that again. And I just wanted to make a couple of notes while you were talking. One of the things that you mentioned, all of those great images from 2019, as we've partnered with the DEC, all of them are on the site now. So if you're watching, you can go on to DEC's website and see all of those campaigns and access all those materials. When we launch, which is super exciting, April 22nd, all of those materials will be available still. But just wanted to make a note that all of them are there, and the imagery and the messaging there has been so helpful and so clear and concise, and I think it has been really working well already. So it's exciting to see what we can do from there. Just any other comments, Matt, before we move on to questions?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that struck me when Jesse was talking about, prior to the marketing and branding portion, you were talking about some of the costs that are embedded in everything we do recycling. And, you know, the reality is I think folks, when we're talking about accepting what is acceptable versus what is recyclable, and trying to really strike an efficiency in that process, and I think the reality is we as a society need to realize we're paying for this one way or another, right? Everything that we do has a cost, and in this case, it's really kind of one of two things. We either have a cost environmentally, or we have a cost in our pocketbook. And we need to understand that when that transportation, when that truck brings that material all the way around for it to only be back in the landfill, that was a cost. And that cost is not somebody else's problem. It's our problem. And we need to accept that. And that the better we get at this, theoretically, not only will we be better for the environment, but we will be more successful and also have less impact on our pocketbook, or even hold costs level and be more successful and recycling more materials as a whole. And that's really what we want folks to get to that point where they understand that choice, that wish is really a choice that if it doesn't connect with them environmentally, maybe it connects with them in the pocketbook.
Yeah, and even further to that point, Matt, is when we get to that point, when we get access to folks and they're engaged and they're learning what happens and the cost that, you know, their municipality, their local government, their community is holding on to this, and they can maybe think about when they're in the grocery store and they're making a choice between something that maybe has a little less packaging, right? to stop the problem before it even occurs, before that purchase is made. So when we can kind of elevate the education to that point, and many of us are already having those conversations and we talk about that in terms of packaging, but that should also be part of the goal for the Recycle Right campaign, which I know it is. So when thinking about all those questions around the municipalities, and we have a couple of questions I'm going to shift over here to some folks that are watching. But certainly, just to kind of reiterate what Jesse said, this website will be able to eventually answer all of the questions for all of these communities. Right now, we're working on getting all the way there, but certainly it'll have the information to get you to the right place right now for those communities. And I want to shift right here. We've got a bunch of them. I'm going to just go in order here, so I'm not going to pick a favorite. This one is about actually Onondaga County here. So most people in Onondaga County don't even know how solid waste is handled or transformed into energy locally. So it sounds like a waste to energy question here. Since we have a WTE, which is waste to energy facility here, why should we recycle? How does it help the community to recycle? Who wants to take it?
I can get started, and we'll see where we want to go with this from there. Certainly, that is it's a great question, because in many cases, waste to energy certainly it's in the waste pyramid, if you will, of choices. It is better than a lot of options, but there are, as you said, first and foremost, reduce and reuse are right there ahead of recycle. And at the end of the day, each community needs to make a decision what's best for their community, and what works in one may not be what's best in another. But here in Onondaga County, using that, pulling that material out of that waste stream first and foremost, is just giving it markets an opportunity to utilize those products and become something that will have less impact on the environment by seeing a second life, or maybe even multiple lives. So there is a benefit. There's obviously the benefit of creating energy from what was energy, in the embedded energy in that material, and that's all well and good. But again, we'd like to see that, as you said, even when the choice you make in consuming, we want to see that use of energy limited as much as possible right from the start, and then ultimately, if it must, return to simply just BTUs at the incinerator or a waste energy facility, then at the end of the day, that is probably better than landfill, but not necessarily our first choice if we can have other options.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Any other additions there?
Sure, yeah, I'll just chime in a little bit too, that there is that benefit of getting that energy from it, but then you're losing that material too, so you're not able to give it that second or that third life. And also, I'm there right now with some of the problematic materials that are coming to the MRF. There is this mechanism for us to say, okay, wait a minute, there's something wrong with the product design of this item that just makes it maybe economically infeasible to recycle. That you might not get from the waste to energy facility. If it's a plastic item that's problematic for a MRF and then it gets turned into BTUs, then it's all good. There's not that communication process going back that we need to shuttle to manufacturers to say, okay, you designed this item to serve a very specific purpose, to hold liquid and to not have it spill out, but it's not able to be separated well at the MRF. Is there something that we can do in the design to either make this more circular, to make it more reusable? So that mechanism shuttling back up to product manufacturers is something that I think sometimes we would miss with waste energy facilities that we have without it. So it's
Yeah, great point, and it gives the opportunity to plug the center again, in that hopefully this is where the state sees us, and that we can start to have those conversations. What are the problems that we're seeing? What are the problem areas? And let's address that low-hanging fruit. Where we're coming and seeing most problems, let's address this with manufacturers. Can we help them? How do we design something that has a more circular design that we can do something with over and over and over again? So great point, Jesse. Thank you. And it leads me to a comment that Mark said here on the website, which is, why are non-recyclable plastics even legal to use? This dooms the program when the consumer is the sole responsible entity. And of course, here at the center and here at ESF, we completely agree. I think that's where we want to head, where we are using plastics that are fully recyclable, but also what we're seeing, and as the recycle market, Matt mentioned National Sword. We have seen those recycling markets are coming back, particularly for plastics that are being recycled into bottles, because we're seeing legislation that is requiring recycled content now. So the more that we see this, that market shifts, and hopefully we will see less non-recyclable plastics out there in the world. Want to make another comment to that, to Mark's comment?
Yeah, I'll just say that it can be terribly confusing, as you mentioned earlier, with the recycling symbol on the plastic bags. I guess I just wanted to jump in there too, and this will be something that we highlight on the website, is the MRFs, the people that are actually doing the job of separating these materials, they're not the ones dictating whether or not that recycling symbol gets put onto the product. That's the manufacturers that do that. They say, here it is. It looks nice on the packaging, but it doesn't mean that there's an effective or efficient way. Maybe at a very highly sophisticated facility somewhere in the country, but for most facilities it might not be easy to separate. So that's a big problem I know that MRFs run into, and it's terribly confusing for people too, because they'll say, it's got the symbol, it's got the 3 chasing arrows on it, so it is recyclable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll add that the market will respond if we can remove some of the complexities in the process, in the systemization of the packaging, as you've talked about. The market will respond, and there is value in these materials. There was a value in the material when it was first manufactured, so therefore there's a value in that material to even be used for that same purpose again. It's a question of, can the market respond and do it without enough complexity for it to be cost effective. And that's what we're striving for, is reduce those complexities. And you talked about working with those manufacturers and their product generation. That's really where it needs to get to. And that's what I hear in Mark's comment right there is, how do we get to the point where the answer, as we said earlier, scientifically, all these things could probably be recycled, but getting it to fit into the acceptability category by removing all those complexities.
I think we have time for one more question. So we did have a question about some compostable containers. So we didn't really talk about this, but what is the number one factor holding back full market dissemination of compostable containers for prepared food to avoid plastics and styrofoam? Does anyone want to comment on that?
This is a good question. I can take a first stab at this. So there, with the introduction of compostable plastic packaging, and these are very different from the other types of plastics that are on the market today, even though they might not look at it from how they look and feel. There were people wish cycling these vegetable starch-based plastics with the petroleum-based plastics, and they are not harmonious. You can't remake a material with those two together. So there was some contamination there. I would say cost is a big factor right now. So there's only, if you look at the market share of those manufacturers that are creating petroleum-based plastics versus those that are making vegetable starch-based plastics, it's still very much in the minority right now, and the system hasn't been built out yet to handle that. So compostable plastics, you can't put them in your backyard home composting setup. You're not going to reach those internal temperatures that's necessary to break down those materials to denature them back into their base components. Your back home yard compost, maybe it'll get to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, but commercial and industrial scale composting facilities will get upwards to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's called their thermophilic range, and they hold it there for a period of time so it breaks those materials down. But there has also been some issues too with fluorinated chemicals, with PFAS, that were either introduced to these materials or they were on the machinery that was making these materials. And PFAS have been an emerging contaminant recently that you might have heard about in the news. So there are third-party organizations and companies right now that are vetting the compostability of these products. And so they're going through re-standardizing their checklist to be certified as compostable, to make sure that fluorinated chemicals are not present in them anymore, because otherwise we're going to have them building up in our compostable materials. So a couple of things right now. It's still kind of a small share of the market, so the market scale of things needs to be brought up, but also emerging contaminants like PFAS too.
Thank you. And it's a great opportunity to say, when we talk about compostable materials, some of the research that we're doing here at ESF with the center is talking about and looking at bioplastics and kind of the future there. So gives me an opportunity to plug some of the shows that'll be happening in April. We're going to have two more in April that are the third and fourth series of the sustainability series, as we discuss some of the research that's happening under the Center for Sustainable Materials Management. I think we have a couple, one or two more minutes here. I will say we always get questions about specific items. Can you recycle them? Can you not recycle them? So we'll just throw some out at you. Literally right before the show started, I got a text from a friend with a Chinese takeout container. Jesse, recycle or no?
I'm going to say for the most part, no. It's so tricky to say yes or no with a lot of materials just because of the variability across the state. Mm-hmm. But there's if you think about like a coffee cup, mm-hmm. It might look like it's paper, but there's actually a very thin plastic lining in there that makes it watertight. It's that moisture barrier, and so those takeout containers might have something similar in there too that you need to watch out for. So my word to you is to say check your local guidelines and make sure that you know them in and out. And if you have questions, there's recycling coordinators, and there are folks that can help to answer some of your specific questions for your local area too.
Okay. How about the containers that my frozen fruit go into?
Frozen food, that one I would say pretty consistent across the state. Watch out for any what might look like cardboard or plastic bags that your frozen food comes into. Those do have very substantial moisture barriers in them that typically makes them not accepted for recycling programs across the state.
Matt, do you have any questions you want to throw at him for recycled items?
I wouldn't do that to them. That'd be a,
I had to. I couldn't
unfair
let it go.
trick. But it speaks to the reason why we need to have such an aggressive campaign. And quite frankly, things are changing all the time. This is not a static challenge. It's dynamic. Manufacturers are putting new products or new twists on products all the time. And we're learning more. Emerging contaminants, you bring that up as a challenge. We're learning more all the time, and so this challenge is complex. But we need to find a way to as the goals of this. If we want to increase participation and increase the quality of those recycled streams, we've got to find a way to communicate that to the people, and we can do it. We can certainly do a better job.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, we thank you both for your time and certainly for the DEC who have invested so much in this effort. As we referenced last time, it's not just the center here. We're working with many partners across the state at universities that are doing this research. I know we engage with UB on some of the behavioral science that helped us with the messaging for Recycle Right, and we are so excited to be able to launch this campaign. So we are coming up April 22nd. The website will be launched. It will go live, and all the bugs will be worked out, right, Jesse? Everything's, yeah. It's going to be great. We'll have all that information, and we'll make sure to provide that out to the ESF community and across the state. Again, we thank you, Matt Marco from the DEC, for joining us today from DEC. Thank you so much for joining us, and
Pleasure
Jesse, thank you. I know neither of you had long commutes to be here today, but we appreciate all of your information and all of the everything you taught us about recycling. I think I learned a little bit today too. And again, this is ESF Connected. We are so happy that you were able to join us. If you have more questions, our emails have been up on the screen. It's kjwalker@esf.edu if you want to learn more about the Center for Sustainable Materials Management. We thank you for joining us today, learning a little bit about how to recycle right in New York State. And thank you so much. We hope that you will join us again for ESF Connected.